Just be plan too. If they feel they fake, I don't got a clue. So many nuts switch them and I swear it's true. Never let they ever consume you. They told me to give up and just start trying. Devil messing with my thoughts, man, I swear ain't lying. God said I'ma be a star, wait till I start shining. He's working ahead of me, this the perfect timing. Snakes in the grass, but it feel like I'm all broke cause I can't find you.
Hi, Noha. It's so nice to have you here with us today. So today, it's kind of a departure of sort from the usual because I'm co-hosting with my friend, Cecilia, and also an avid supporter of our Africa. So I'd like to introduce Noha. Dr. Noha Sharafeldin is an assistant professor in the Department of Medicine at the University of Alabama in the US. She has a PhD in public health and she's also a medical doctor. Noha is from Egypt and also a dear friend. She relocated from Egypt to Canada and then left Canada for the US. We're going to talk about that later. So, but for now, tell us about yourself, Noha. What is your story and your career path till date?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Dunsi, for this opportunity. And thank you, Cecilia, for being here. I'm so excited for our talk today. Like you said, we go way back to our PhD years and very dear friendship. And I'm just beyond excited with what you're doing here with our Africa. And I really commend you for this effort. It's amazing.
Thank you.
My story, wow, okay, that would take a long time or not. I mean, like, as you mentioned, I come from Egypt. I finished my medical degree over there, did a master's, and then moved to Canada to complete my PhD. And then a year after I graduated from the PhD program, got the opportunity to come to the US for the postdoc position that then evolved into a faculty position. I mean, yes, you're right. I've moved a bit. I actually, here's a fun fact. I didn't, like my early years, I didn't grow up in Egypt. My father worked in United Arab Emirates, so that's where I grew up. All the way, my elementary years were all spent over there. And then middle school and high school, we went back to Egypt, and obviously college and then after. So after I graduated from medical studies, I practiced for a while. I took an anesthesiology residency. And then an opportunity came for me to join academic medicine, so public health and community medicine. And that's when I transferred to the Department of Community Medicine. And, you know, the rest of history is like doing public health and epidemiology and becoming an epidemiologist. But during that period, during my master's training, before even I went to Canada, I had the amazing opportunity to work with international researchers from Institut Pasteur in Paris, France. And it was a huge project in collaboration with Institut Pasteur and my alma mater, Ain Shams University. And we were tackling hepatitis C, which is an endemic disease in Egypt. And I had the wonderful opportunity of being, sent to get trainings in Europe, like in Amsterdam and in Paris. I spent a few summers there. So I wouldn't say I lived in Europe, but I spent quite a while. So that's one of like the most periods of my life that I have very fond memories of. Like I was young, starting my professional career, no kids, no family, so kind of a free bird. So yeah, it was a great period, and I learned a lot that stayed with me and helped me professionally going forward.
I'm sure you are a true certified global citizen.
That's interesting. It's my pleasure, Noha, to meet you, and just listening to the summary of your story, I'm just feeling so excited and pumped because for me, when I see a woman doing what they do and being successful, it just gives me joy. And when I see a fellow African woman, it just amplifies the joy for me. So kudos to you. I'm like, wow, it's so much experience, You look too young to have gone through all these things that you have.
You're so
So-
kind.
but yeah, no, you mentioned something that actually struck the chord in me. You mentioned where you've been in different countries, and you said you have had those experiences and the connections, and you carry them with you. So talk to us a little bit more about your experiences, and as you carry them with you, what has been that keeps you going, and in spite of some difficulties you have encountered as a woman?
You try and make the best of your situation and try to, learn obviously from your past experiences. And I think you would sometimes think, well, I mean, luck plays a role. You get lucky with, meeting the right people, having the right support mechanism around you. That sometimes definitely helps. And you also make choices, right? Of what you can accept, what you can deal with, what you can make the best of. And there's always limits. Like you draw your limits. Like, yes, let's say I'm living now in a foreign country and it's a different culture. It's not where I grew up. Yes, I need to adapt to what's going around me. Yes, I need to understand the culture where I am now living, but I also need to keep my own identity.
My follow-up question to that is, how in our conventional literature, there are different ways of categorizing different groups of people, differentiating them. I don't mind diversity. I'm not opposed to diversity, but I am concerned when the categories either disempower some groups or empower some other groups. So for example, Africa is quite diverse. Look at us today. So my question is, what is it like for you to be a white African Muslim woman living in North America?
Thank you, Nancy. That's a very loaded question. Yes. Here's the thing. So I come from Egypt, right? And I think we touched on this and like over the years, maybe in our conversation as well before. I wouldn't, when I think of it this way, and I'm talking about my own perspective. I wouldn't say how I grew up or how I identify would necessarily align with thinking of myself as, how should I put this? Maybe the best way to say this is I sometimes feel I wish I was more African than what I really feel I am, if that makes sense. Because the way how geographically we are and how we are raised and how our history goes, we identify more as Middle Easterns, and with the Middle East and with their own culture, own background, language, food, how even we look, like you mentioned, all of that. But I have this connection still. Like I still feel I am African, but I feel like it's so, like you mentioned, it is it breaks my heart, and it feels so unfair to just think of how that Africa is one big pot, because we, like you said, I mean, regardless of using the word diverse, but yes, we are a big group. There is definitely a thread connecting us in some sense, but there's so many shapes and forms that we can come from. But you're right. I mean, so the other thing is, like, when I moved to the US, even like I feel like I get connected with that more in the US compared to when I lived in Canada, for example. This idea of identifying as of African origin. Like like you said, like since moving here, every survey I have to complete, they ask about my race. Every single, whether that's a health survey, whatever random survey. I mean, like I get asked that question, I don't know, too many times. And then the next step, and I mean, I think it's obvious that I'm a woman, but the other piece is the Muslim piece, because I don't wear the traditional like hijab, like the Muslim dress. So it's not still obvious. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is it might have helped, might not, but when I interact with someone for the first time, it's not so easy for them to figure out who I am. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So it's not easy for them to just categorize me, bin me, she's so-and-so, and then automatically, like, it's all the data is downloaded in their head of what to, perceive of me. So people have mistaken me for Indian sometimes. People have mistaken me for South American.
Yep.
People, I mean, not a lot of people guess that I'm Egyptian, which is interesting. Or, I mean, sometimes from the Middle East, but in general, it's not so straightforward where I come from. So I think and I didn't, like I said, I kind of like started to realize that more in the last few years after I moved here, and getting into so many conversations and just observing how this is a huge factor of how your community perceives you and interacts with you. It actually puts me at this kind of an advantage, if you will, because if they don't have this perceived impression of who I am or where I come from or what I stand for, then it's on me now to kind of create this image, if you will, or that figure, and help them understand, yes, I am Muslim, and yes, Muslims can look like this. Yes, I am from Africa. Specifically, when people learn I'm from Egypt, a lot of people still think, I mean, till recent years, there's this very common joke where they would say, oh, so you ride camels back in Egypt. The Egyptian part specifically, because a lot of people have some background about Egypt and our history. A lot of, we study it in school. Like my kids study it at school. So that's, I mean, obviously like certain portions, and obviously in pop culture and in movies and all of that. So people have this perception of, and a lot of people would say, you know what, Egypt is on my bucket list. I really want to visit there. And I say, yeah, please come. Yes, please come. It's such a rich country. And if you love the sea, you can come. If you want to dive, you can come. If you love the history, you can come. If you just want to have great foods, you can come and have a good time. So we have it all. And we ride cars and we live in normal houses, and we're
That's too funny. So
Yeah,
that's interesting you say that, Noah, and I think what you've just shared speaks to the subconscious mind in how we have unconscious bias, right? So I think you are in a good privileged position where people have to they can't guess who you are, and so they can't use their stereotypical bias in terms of treating you, except they see you are a woman, and you could be Asian, you could be Indian, you could be so. But I think one of the things you mentioned was the differences you felt when you moved from Canada to the US. Can you speak a little bit about, do you find the race relations are more pronounced in the US than in Canada? What's your experience about that?
I mean, the short answer is yes. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone how it is, because and there's two parts to it. So when I lived in Canada, I was really lucky to end up in having a huge community. A lot of them were actually Egyptians. I ended up actually having, from my small circle, were two friends who we went to the same school back home in Egypt. So what are the chances? So I like to joke, and I'm sorry, I'm going to use the term diverse, Duncy, but when my older son, when he started kindergarten in Canada, I would always say, I would go into his classroom and it's like you're almost in a UN meeting. Like people from everywhere, from all backgrounds, all races, it's just so beautiful, all colors, and it was just so beautiful. And I felt like this is exactly where I want my kids to grow up and to be exposed to this at a young age. Because even I mean, I did a little bit because, like I said, I grew up in UAE, and there were a lot of expats there. So I did get exposed. And I think that's what made it way easier for me to adapt growing up, is just being exposed to different people at a young age. So that's exactly how I wanted their experience to be. After I moved here, we just ended up in one of the suburbs. And again, because, you know, there's the age of, there's some, you know, practical decisions you make because your kids are older and you want to put them in a good school and whatnot. And I ended up actually in a very homogenous community when I got here. And that took a toll on me for a while. And then over and above, like you said, Cecilia, just being constantly exposed to all those issues we all know and feel and sense that are related to race, and how that impacts our everyday life. Like I said, I became more in tune with it, more sometimes stressed by it. Sometimes I wouldn't say I felt like threatened in a way. I wouldn't say it reached to that point at all. I'd be lying, but it still takes a toll on you, and it stresses you out, and you start to think like, what can I do? Like, what can I do in my little, you know, with my little piece that I want to, you know, contribute to this society or this world? What can I do? And you struggle with that, and you feel like it's your response. I mean, like, even if before it wasn't at the forefront, what's happening around you just puts it there, and there's no hiding, there's no turning your blind eye. You can't. It's there in front of you. So but it allowed me to have more candid conversations, allowed me to think about, again, like we were talking about, like where I come from, what I represent, what I teach my kids, what I tell them when we go back to Egypt, or when we travel somewhere else, or we even, you know, I try to take them out of that same small circle and just expose them to the wider community. We live in the South of the US. And to be honest, I wasn't very, like, I had traveled to the US before, even when I was still in Egypt and when I was in Canada. But, you know, when you come in, you usually go to I mostly, it was in the northern part of the US. And when you come as a, like, you know, whatever, like I'm coming for a conference or for a, you know, visit or tourism. It's a totally different experience than when you're now actually living here and dealing with the system. And, you know, the South is beautiful. The weather is amazing. I have no complaint. So I have to say, they are very famous of their Southern hospitality, but then they have this very long history.
Well, back to your point, Noha, I like what you said about people trying to fit you into some kind of category. The first time I ran into that problem was working on big data, census data. And then I got this backlash, mostly from white Africans, saying they don't belong in any of these categories. It's quite complex. It's a complex world that we live in. I look forward to the day when we all can just be referred to as human beings.
We are the same, and we all have the same aspirations. We all have the same struggles. We all have the same dreams and hopes. We all want the same thing, really, if you think about it. We have the good, we have the bad, we have the, you know, all of it. And this is when, as I move from different countries and I get to know more people, when you really think about it, yes, you look so different than me. You're way whiter than me. You have so much privilege than me, or not. You don't, and unfortunately, you don't have the same privilege as me, whatever that may be. But at the end of the day, we all are. When you think about it, we all just want the same thing. Sure. We want to be, you know, live a good life, have whatever your interests be fulfilled, whatever your dreams be fulfilled. And it's no different. It's really no different. So once you come to that, you just feel this beautiful human connection with whoever is sitting next to you. And that's why I absolutely admire what you're doing here, because just giving this voice, this is what is needed. Like we grew up just listening to one side of the story, and always whoever has the mic looks exactly the same. Generations over generations, what we read in the books, what we were exposed to, it's just that same image. And we have to, start, widening that spectrum.
There's a lot of myth around Africa, based on particular experiences or just generalization, or thanks to the media and documentary. So how do you handle questions like that? Like when people come up with, for me, I see it as misleading in some sense, or quite ignorant questions. How do you approach that? And I have tons on my list.
I have taught myself not to be offended. I think because I generally feel like if the person in front of me had the courage to express those, ask those questions, and even if there's a negative tone to it or some negative impression, this is my opportunity to fix it or straighten the facts, if you will. So it does, you feel that in your throat, and you feel like, ugh, why? Why do I have to explain this? But as years went by, as I've learned to just see it as an opportunity to, just tell them the facts, tell them the truth. Like, I'll tell you something, and again, like you said, the media played a huge role. On TV, you would see all those ads, especially around the holidays. It's like, donate to this, and it's just like this image of this, like you said, the poor African kid walking around, very malnourished, in a very bad condition, which I'm not saying it's not absolutely untrue, but this is not the only thing going on. It's unfair.
Not the entire story.
It's exactly. And you just, reducing it to just this piece has hurt us generations after generations.
Yes.
In a similar vein, for me, for example, coming from Egypt, in recent years, there has been the Arab Spring, and a lot of, the revolution and violence, and presidents going away, and others coming over, and, who is in power, and all the unrest that's been happening in the Middle East. And it's in the news all the time. So in more recent years, actually, what people would come up to me, again, Egypt is on my bucket list since school. This is what I've always wanted to go and visit, but it's unsafe to go there. Is it safe? And like, when I say I go there over the summer, and I just like, when I say, so what are your plans for summer? I was like, home, I'm going home. And they're like, is it safe to go there? Are you taking the kids? And I'm like, yes. They're even more excited than me now to go.
Exactly.
Like you said, my kids, whenever I say, okay, this year we're going to Egypt, you will not believe the genuine happiness and excitement they are in. And although it's not exactly, it's a little bit put them out of, like, yes, it does feel a little bit exotic. Yes, it's like in this different environment. Yes, there's family, there's so many pieces to it. But they really enjoy being there. Even, listening to the language, and getting exposed to that on a daily basis, and everywhere in the street, and just talking to people, and like buyers, like sellers in the street or whatnot. So yeah, I get that question a lot. Is it safe? And when there was the peak of this unrest, I would say, yeah, maybe this is not the right time. But in more recent years, as things start to stabilize, I say, yes, it is. Just like any other big city, if you're in Cairo, just like if you're in New York or Chicago or whatnot, or Toronto, whatever, you use common sense. Yeah. I mean, you don't walk in New York streets, with, I don't know, just throwing bills or wearing whatever, or just pulling attention. You will get mugged,
Yes.
So in the biggest of all places. So you just use common sense where you are. You do your homework before going to the place, and where the, use courtesy in how you handle, local people, and you're gonna be fine. So so like I said, I try not to get offended by it, because it is what it is. One, we can sit here forever and say, why? Like, why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do that? Why do I look like this? Why do I have to? And there's another way of handling this, is like, acknowledge where you are, what you have, what you don't have, what privilege, what disadvantage, and just make the best of it and move on. Like when Cecilia, I love you. You said I look young. Thank you so much. I'm not going to say how old I am, but when I started my program, I was older than a lot of people in the program, in the PhD program. Right now, even as a faculty, there is, I'm older than a lot of my colleagues age-wise, not maybe necessarily professionally.
I'm older, Noha, but we won't talk about age.
We're not going to go there.
Like I was the oldest in grad school.
We're not too old. We're going to give an impression that we're too old now. We're not. But anyways, it's what I was trying to get at is, I sometimes, I would sit back and say, because, I look at my kids and I feel, I'm glad I'm trying, like, as everyone everywhere is trying to give the best life to their families and to their children. And whatever, like, that's what my parents did with me. They gave me what they didn't have. Whatever they had missed growing up, they tried to, and they did provide it for me. So I did have more, in a sense, not necessarily materialistic, but I did have more opportunity than what they had. And this is how normal progression is, right? So now I feel like I'm happy that I'm able, or content, I would say, that I'm able to provide that to them, and the opportunity that you're given right now, and just try to make the best of it, and focus on it right now, because if you do this piece, whatever it is, like what you're currently focused on, do it right, do your best, and then the next opportunity will just present itself. Of course, you would have a general plan of where you want to go, what you want to do, but trust me, it always presents itself. The next step, it always shows up, and it's sometimes you're surprised. It's like, really? I never expected this, like me. But then things happen to you. There's a beautiful motto that I live with. It's Louis Pasteur. He says, chance favors the prepared mind. So some of it would seem like you got lucky or it just happened to you, but it's yes, there could be an element of that, but really, if you're prepared, if you know what you're doing right now, you're making the best of it, the next opportunity will just come knocking your door.
Oh,
That's beautiful.
Wise words from an Egyptian, the seat of civilization. So what do you do for self-care, Noha?
I think I might give you the generic answer, like what everyone, I would, go on walks, read, all of that good stuff. I try, it's always, it's not a uniform line. You sometimes go off track, but the one thing I have most recently started to kind of make a priority is learn new things. So I used to, some time of my life, I would give priority to, learning something new, whatever that it may be, a skill, or trying something new, not necessarily like, just even trying something. Like when I was in Canada, I went one time, I attempted skiing. It was a disaster.
There's no way.
It was a complete disaster. The whole group was way ahead of me, and they would look back. I was like, should we, what? So, but I still, it's one of the, my beautiful memories is like always trying to just challenge yourself. It gives you this beautiful rush and it makes you feel alive.
Yes.
And it keeps you going, right? So the most recent thing that I wanted to do is like, I've always wanted to learn how to sew. My mother and my grandmother had one of those, vintage sewing machines in her house, and I've always loved how it looked. My mom is good as that as well. I'm not so good with it. I'm horrible. Like if I would, it looks, it never looks good. So anyways, there was this quilting class. And I was like, okay, that's close enough. So I went on and I took it, and it was, especially after what we've all been through in the isolation of the last year and a half, and all of us being, stuck where we were, and, going through all the stress of as the world had to endure, all of us. So it was just so refreshing to just go out there, meet people you don't know outside of your professional circle. They don't know who you are, what you work. You don't have to talk about work, or, they have zero impression on you. And you too, you have no impression of, it's just like nice people. And let's talk about this interesting activity of making, art. So it's, and like it turns out like one of my, someone I used to work with in Canada, she had took that up a few years ago, and she's very professional in it at this point. She goes into competitions and stuff. And she describes it as being this perfect marriage between art and math. And I just loved how she described it, because, it is true, because you're putting all those nice shapes, but then it has to look still pretty, and there's some skill to it. So anyways, I think what I've been trying to do now is just every once in a while try something new, and use that as a kind of a refresher before you can go.
I was going to show you what I do.
Oh, show me! Love it!
Oh.
Look at you! Look
Nice.
at you! My mom
Fantastic.
has, she's knitted like clothes and hats and coats for my kids, and I did a little bit of that, but I lost it.
Very
I love it.
relaxing
Very,
when I'm
very.
stressed out. Yeah.
Like one homework we had was to actually quilt the whole thing and like sew through the whole thing. And I came home that day, I was like, oh my God, this is going to take me ages. This is a very bad idea. And I was just starting, I was like, this is never going to end. And like, guess what? And 2 hours later, when it was done, I was like, so sad that it was over. I was like, okay, I have to start a new project, because you just get so absorbed. Yep. And your mind is just clearing up, and yep. You start to, whatever that problem you've been struggling with, and just like, it's all of a sudden now things are just lining up, and you can think more clearly now.
Yeah.
I just attended, just very quickly, Duncy, been to a talk lately, and the speaker, she was talking about knitting while attending talks or listening or being in meetings. Yep. Like when you're in a board meeting, very important meeting, and you're supposed to make decisions or whatnot, having this, some people need that.
It keeps you grounded.
Exactly.
And focused. Yeah.
Exactly. You will look like you're distracted, like you're not present. It actually makes you even more present. It's very fascinating just thinking that way. Yeah. So keep up the knitting. I want to see how it looks like, and I'll send you a picture of my quilt.
When I'm done, I'm an amateur though. Look at this.
You need that in Canada. It's gonna come in handy.
Yes. I need a scarf.
Yes.
These haters be plan too. If they feel they fake, I don't got a clue. So many nuts switch them and I swear.